Hey everybody, welcome to the Everybody Has a Podcast with Scott Asher and J.D. Swilling. This is episode 2. We're so glad that you're here with us today. Thank you. If you listened to episode 1, thank you so much for listening and patronizing us and making us feel good about ourselves. And so far, Scott, I haven't received any hate mail, and my wife hasn't made me stop doing this podcast yet either.
We did get the, you should play this podcast for us before you publish it.
And we did, and we ended up editing some of it, didn't we?
We did, yeah.
My children are a little nervous about this too.
If your children listen to it, you are winning.
Oh, they're not going to listen to it. They're just going to assume that I say a bunch of inappropriate things.
Well, I mean, that's kind of harsh.
I shouldn't say inappropriate. I just, maybe the better thing to say is they're going to assume I say things that embarrass them.
Oh, yeah. Well, then we'll have to have that. We'll have to have an episode just on embarrassing family moments.
But today, what are we talking about today? We got to kind of catch up from where we started. When did we record the first episode? It's been
2 weeks, I think, exactly. Even though it published last week, the recording was 2 weeks exactly.
You're right. It was 2 weeks ago from today is when we recorded. Mm-hmm. So that was April the 2nd. Today's April the 16th. And surely we can get this one posted before an entire week goes by. So what's happened in the world in the last 2 weeks?
A couple big things. School's out forever.
School is out.
Was finally correct.
It's true.
Yeah, for the rest of the school year.
That's for public schools.
That's right.
Private schools are out also, but we are continuing to do lots and lots of work at home. And so in addition to all the other things that mom and dad are continuing to do around the house and the world, we're now having to do a lot more math problems with the kids and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, we've been telling our kids to do stuff, but I mean, if they put in an hour a day, that's kind of a lot. That's really pushing. It's not like the private schools, not like yours. I mean, sure, your kids are going to end up smarter, but mine are going to end up with more sleep. So there is that.
They're going to end up with more street smarts.
Video game smarts, whatever. Same thing, right?
Yeah.
In other sad news, one of the things we talked about on the last episode was the churches that were staying open. And unfortunately, one of those churches, I think the one in Virginia that stayed and held services, that pastor ended up getting sick and passed away.
Oh, it's tragic.
And yeah, it's terrible. And this isn't I was right, we were right, you were wrong kind of thing. It's more of a, man, use your wisdom, because when we talked about this, we talked about being wise about the health of your congregants. And I mean, these are older pastors that are doing it. A lot of them are older ones in the news. And, but the good news is some people have been being creative. They've had the drive-in Easter thing. There were some tickets, but that got waived now, so that's good. I don't know if you heard that. The tickets ended up
being waived, I thought that was a little bit of an overreach, in my opinion.
Definitely.
The people that had drive-in church, every adult that showed up, the police department or sheriff's department or whatever, was handing out tickets, $500 tickets to those folks.
Which is crazy, right? Red light tickets aren't $500. Speeding tickets aren't $500. So that's pretty crazy. And there's been more than that, more than just church. You hear about a person paddleboarding or on a kayak, or I think the governor in Michigan, wasn't it Michigan, said you can't buy seeds.
Yeah.
And you can't, weird
you
extra
can buy
rules.
Weed,
so this isn't just
can't buy seed.
Right. So it's not necessarily a church thing, but the overreach is a issue that we need to address, I think, as Americans. I don't like the idea that the government can just decide to say, you've got to stay home and you can't do this, but you can do this. But there's been some good governors. Some governors are, what's the guy that's doing a really good job? Devaney, or I don't know. He's got a name like that. And he's coming out and having daily meetings, and he's explaining with some scientists, like medical people, like this is what we're doing and this is why we're doing it. I think that's the key, is when you're going to have a big change like this, you have to do a better job of change management. You have to explain the benefits and the why of what we're doing. And you can't just be arbitrary or be seen to be arbitrary. And giving people a $500 ticket when they are isolated in their own car because they drove somewhere to church, that's arbitrary. So I'm glad that was changed, but that's just overreach. It's nonsense.
Yeah, and it's incredibly tragic. The pastor that died in Virginia, he continued to hold church services, and he contracted COVID and passed away from it. And I was thinking about this, and as tragic as it is, I do want to make it clear that I, in no way, shape, or form, and I would probably say this about you. You can comment for yourself, but I don't think that was God's judgment on him. No more do I think that COVID is God's judgment on the world either. But what I do think is, I think that this is a tipping point for the church around the world, and especially the church in America. And I think it's a tipping point. And I was in a forum yesterday with some other pastors, and one of the ways it was described was that it was a burning bush moment. And Moses, he's out herding the flock on Mount Hebron and comes across the burning bush. And really, he has a choice. Does he turn aside, or does he just continue herding the flock? And he turns aside, and fortunately he does so, and he's not the same from that point forward. His act of obedience, his act of paying attention to what God was wanting to do, he becomes a different person. And not everything changes in that moment, but you do see a gradual shift and change moving forward. And I think that this is the opportunity that the Lord is inviting us to in this moment. And I'm not saying God caused COVID-19, that he's the one that's making all these people die. But I do think he's inviting us to participate with something in this moment. And I think it's important for believers in the American church and for church leaders to lean into, all right, God, we don't want to squander this time. We truly want to be different on the other side of this than we are right now.
Yeah, and I think that there are signs that is happening, and then signs that it isn't. Like we were talking earlier, where I saw a news article today that said that streaming on average was like 8 hours a day of streaming. Wow. For households in America right now. So there's a lot of TV shows and movies, and we might even talk about some movies that we watched recently. So I'm not saying I'm against that, but the question is, are we putting any time into the Word and into prayer, and I know I can do a better job of that personally.
I was specifically thinking of you.
Hand, I know, now that I have this outlet with like 10 people that listen to this podcast, I need to be better. But there are more Bibles being sold. They see the records, like a ton of Bibles are being sold, right? Which is a really good sign. But I don't think sold Bibles has ever been a problem for the United States. It's more about open to Bibles that have been a problem. Yeah. And of course I'm preaching myself here, but are we doing what we could do? Because there's stuff we could stream. There's the Bible Project videos. One of my friends at work asked and said, is there anything on the life of Jesus that you would recommend? And I'm like, go do the book of Luke on the Bible Project, like 5-minute videos, animated, lively. You get a lot of learning in it as well. And she went and watched that with her son and said they watched 3 of them right away. And I'm like, yeah, because it's great.
Yeah.
But what I find myself doing a lot is flipping on Netflix and trying to find something, and maybe a half hour of flipping through, like watching trailers and so on. And then I settle on something and I don't really like it. So I switch to the next one or whatever. And you end up, next thing you know, social media, or, you're hours into your day. And nothing's really, you've not developed yourself at all. And I changed the pronouns there to you, have not developed yourself at all, and you have I've switched that. That was really genius of me accidentally doing that. But But yeah, I think we got to be mindful about that. So if this is a burning bush moment, we could be a little bit better with our time. And there's some really great, easy ways to do that. Bite-sized chunks. So we could come out of this really knowledgeable, learning new stuff, being ready to do stuff.
Yeah. I was talking to my brother-in-law about some of this. Oh, by the way, you magically have a pair of headphones in your head all of a sudden.
Yeah, sorry. We're still trying to fix the sound as we go. So
that's okay.
You like
all
them?
Right. Yeah.
There you go.
So my brother-in-law and I were talking about all this last night, and he threw out a statistic to me. I don't know where he got this from, but we talked about something similar to this in our pastors forum yesterday. And he said that 50% of churches around America right now are growing via online engagement. And I would say that, for certainly for our church, that we are having a much larger reach right now than we had if before all of this happened. We did stream before. We did live stream our services before, but I will say the quality of our live stream has increased quite a bit because we've been forced to actually increase the quality, or at least I feel that we've been forced that way. And that's not no one's twisted our arm to do that. I think that's a good thing. Yeah. So the quality has increased, which is great. And which is also really good because, we're having more and more people. Our attendance basically has gone up tenfold. If we look at the analytics, if we look at the amount of people who are viewing and who are staying on for quite a bit of a time, we're talking about our actual physical congregation is 10% of who is actually viewing us online now. Mm-hmm. So now that puts us into a mindset and in a mind frame of going, well, who's watching us? This is more than just our people. So our people are watching us, but also other people who are probably other believers are watching us, and they're just hungry for more things, or maybe they're related to us in some way. Maybe it's, clients of my wife or family members of mine, or just other people that we're networked or connected with, and they just want to see what our church is doing, and that's great. So we've got our people, we've got people who are hungry, then we've got people I think who are just curious. They're just going, all right, how is the church responding in this moment? What's going on? That they may not be Christians, they might be, but they're definitely not in the church. And so they're just kind of curious, and they're checking out what church is doing and how they're responding. Then I think we've got people who are skeptics, who are maybe have been skeptical of the church for a long time, but now is their moment to actually kind of creep in and observe, because they can do it covertly, Mm-hmm. And so we've got their part of our audience now. And then also I think prodigals, that's the Bible word for people who used to be in the church, but have walked away maybe from the Lord, but now they are like being awakened to, oh man, I need to come back. I need to get right. I need to come back. Mm-hmm. And so I think our audience is quite larger than it has been since we've just been meeting in physical buildings. And I know for me, I probably haven't done the absolute best job of reframing our services to communicate to all 5 of those demographics. But I do think I have been trying to do a little bit better job of widening the scope. And I'm going to, as we move forward, I'm going to try to do better of thinking about, we've got these 5 different audiences that are listening and watching online.
Yeah, there's a lot less pressure right now for people. It's socially acceptable to kind of audit church, so to speak. Like, but if you go there in person, that's hard. I had a conversation with someone, and and he was saying he wanted to go to church, and we were talking about church. But then he's like, well, he had a series of questions like, is this welcome there? Is that welcome there? What's it like? What do you have to dress? And you start going down that list, and it's not just him, but there's a lot of people that have those questions, like showing up to an event, that you don't know really what's going on. Even if you know someone, can be daunting. but going online first to see what it's like is easier. Like when I ended up first coming to Seeds Church, before I did, I had a couple of months where I was checking churches just to see what there was. From the time I had moved to this state for over 11 years, I was going to the same church from week 1 all the way till then. Same church. I never visited other churches, and I was curious. And for me, it was really easy to go online and just be like, okay, let's go watch one of these services. And, I hate to say it because I'm not trying to say we should all be shopping, but truly there are cultural differences in terms of what you're looking for in a church that matter. You can have 2 really great Bible teaching churches that are not heretical, that are good, that people love each other, and they could be completely different, and maybe you fit in one and maybe you don't fit in another. And going online allowed me to quickly rule in places that I wanted to visit live and rule out places that I probably wouldn't fit well in, and I don't think that that's a bad thing. I think one of the benefits of having a lot of denominations is that it matches the fact that there are a lot of different people, and different people have different preferences. And it's, again, I'm not saying mold the church for ourselves, but leaders and pastors are going to bring a culture, and that culture is going to match that, whether it's a corporate culture or a church culture or something else. People that are drawn to that specific culture are going to fit in there, and then they're going to feel more welcome if it matches. So if I go to a church that I can wear shorts and flip-flops and make occasional sarcastic comments, and the pastor doesn't want to kick me out, I'm going to feel a lot more comfortable there. But if I walk into a place and everyone's got suits on, I might love the people there. They might love me, but is that really the reason? I mean, like, maybe that's just not for me. Maybe I'm just not as solemn as that, or I'm not as wild as that, or whatever. So I think this is a low pressure way for people to get their church and get to know what the church is and get to know the people in the church. And so it's kind of good in that way. I think it's good in that way. And I don't know what's going to end up happening afterwards, but I think it's good that people get to try this stuff out.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think that moving forward, that even after everything goes back to normal, which there's not going to be such of a thing, that I think that many churches are going to probably do more than they've done before online with their online presence, and meaning more than just have a website. They're probably going to be more engaged with social media. They're probably going to be more engaged on with their live streaming. One of the things that we're trying to figure out right now is how to stream on multiple platforms as well, not just Facebook Live. And I know that we can make it happen. It's just a matter of time of getting those dots connected. It's just one of those little minor things that that we're working towards, so that we can reach wider audiences. Not so that we can go, hey everybody, look how many views that we had. It's not about a numbers game, but what we do know is that everyone that views is a soul. That's a human being. It's someone that was created in the image and likeness of God. And we're not just assuming that because they're created in God's image that they are in relationship with their creator. And so it is important for us, if we're having a larger reach, it's important for us to do what we can to present the gospel well and give people opportunities to turn toward the Lord. So we're going to continue to do our best to do that. Again, this is not a church podcast, but we're talking about church stuff.
I had challenged J.D. that we should talk about like 3 things that we don't think are going to go back to normal after this is over. And we did not talk about it ahead of time because I want to be surprised by what he says and just kind of see where it goes, because we have a lot in common, but I think that, there's some interesting differences there. So I can go first with the first one. We can rotate back and forth if you like.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think won't go back to normal is I think more people are going to work from home after this. And
you stole one of mine.
Well, well, good. We
like
can
it
talk
was
about the same.
like it was a big surprise.
You're
But
like,
no,
my surprise is also that. Yeah, and the reason for that is because many businesses, not everybody can work from home, and I'm not suggesting that all of a sudden our whole economy will be us living in pods like the Matrix or something. Okay, but but we're seeing corporations find ways to get people into their homes working and productive, um, where you might not have thought that that was possible even a few months ago. You might not have thought that that was
yeah,
possible, and now it's going. And for me personally, it took 2 or 3 weeks before we got our stride, but now we're kind of almost back to business as usual in terms of how things are going. And I just don't see why a business would say, oh, okay, good. Let's go ahead and bring everybody that we sent home to great expense. We set up their computers, we set up whatever they needed. Let's bring them back into this massive building that we have to pay utilities, rent, taxes on, electricity, people to watch them. And then you've got all of the things that are going to go wrong there. You're going to have, whatever might go wrong in terms of HRs. You might have sickness issues. You might have people getting there late. All those things going to go away, well, or are mitigated, better if you're able to work from home and you can save money. And so I just think that businesses are smart. Their job is to make money and become more efficient. And I just think that there's some efficiencies and some money savings for people working from home.
I think you're absolutely right. And to piggyback on top of that, I think that unfortunately, we're going to find out that, and maybe I'm stealing this from you, that as we send more people home to work, we're going to find that we might have overstaffed in some areas. So I think some people are going to lose their jobs, not because of there's not money to pay them, but just simply because they're not as necessary as maybe we thought that they were. Because we've learned how to use technology differently, and new systems have been developed. They say that necessity is the mother of invention, right? And so here we are in this moment in history where there's a lot of necessity, and there are people, very smart people, that are working on systems and technology and figuring out how to get things done. And I think some people are going to be without work, and I think that's a horrible forecast. I don't want that to happen. I don't want people to lose their jobs, but I think it's important for us to just be not naive about it.
Yeah, well, we had a we had a coming disruption anyways with machine learning and artificial intelligence and automation. I mean, you already see every place that you can go has a kiosk. You can go order food, you can go pick it up yourself. And I heard something, man, I don't want to quote it wrong, but it was something like $11,000 a second additional income for Amazon, some crazy high number like that, because everyone's at home, so everyone's ordering everything, right? And so you're starting to see people where systems and machines and algorithms and artificial intelligence, we're going to take over a lot of these jobs anyways. And I think I've played this game with you before. Like, think of a job that artificial intelligence can't do. And it's really difficult to figure out what jobs would be safe in a world like that. And in this world, we're kind of fast forwarding the adoption of many of these efficiencies and automations. And so I kind of agree with you. But the good news is that every other time in American and in world history where we've had some really disruptive technology come in, humans have repositioned themselves. So when the Industrial Revolution came along, we figured out new jobs. There were new things that humans could do. And so I think that there will be, I'm not sure what those are right now, but if we did have a big disruption where maybe we had too many people, maybe, efficiencies and automation can solve some of these things, I think we'll be creative. I think we'll find new ways to do it. So I don't think this means that people will be out of work indefinitely. I think that what it means is that we're going to see really creative people find new ways to do it. And so I think we'll just have different kinds of jobs. Hopefully.
Yeah, I think so too. I think that that's for certain. I think it's important for people to um, be willing to learn new skills. Also, I think those who aren't willing to learn new skills are going to be hurting, unfortunately,
or unable. Because I'm sorry, I still got allergies or something. Not the COVID, but not the corona. But some people aren't capable, and there are people that I know that are very smart people. Okay, but some things just escape them. Technology is not something that they really get, and
that's true.
And so we're going to have to find ways to help make things easier. And I love that this is forcing people this situation. And I don't love anything about Corona. I'm trying to find silver lining here, but I love that people that weren't necessarily thinking, I've got to find new ways of connecting, I've got to find new ways of doing things online, but now they are. And other people are being really helpful to them. The ones that aren't getting it are getting it. Like I got my grandma an Echo Show, one of the bigger screen ones, and now about once a week we do a video call. And and she's almost 90 years old, and setting it up was a pain. Sorry, Grandma, but you know what? She got done with that call with me, and she went and figured it out on her own. I did not think she'd be able to do that, but she did. She logged in, she got it up and running, and she called me back like a little bit later and said, "Hey, I've got it working." And I was like, "How did you get it working?" Because unfortunately, I'm the most patient over the phone technical support person. I was like, "Push the button." Anyways,
Good job, Gigi.
but she did. Yeah, good job. And now we've had a couple of different video calls where she's sitting there talking to us. And this is something that, if she wasn't in the situation that she's in right now to be forced to do that, she'd be like, well, I'm just going to fly out there and visit you in May anyway. So what's the point of the video? But now it's like, no, let's get this set up.
It's good.
So if I used your first one, do you have a second one? You can go first so you can steal my thunder.
No. It's okay. We can just keep bouncing back and forth. I think one of the things, and I've already noticed this, and this goes right along with what you're just saying, is that more people are going to be using technology in newer ways that may have already, the technology may have existed already, but they had not seen the need for it. And so I'll give you an example. Mm-hmm. My entire family, or my side of the family, I should say, is all active on Marco Polo right now. So even like my parents, my mom is on Marco Polo. My cousin, who I don't know, I just don't see her as a Marco Polo person before this, but we have just like a little family group on Marco Polo. And so if you don't know what that is, it's an app. It's a video chatting or messaging app. So anyway, I think people are going to utilize technologies that may have even already existed, but they didn't see the need for. And so I think that's going to drive. I think that's going to drive more technology to be created, and I also think it's going to drive the economy a little bit.
Well, I was going to say I agree with you, because while we have some areas of the economy shut down, that Amazon thing I told you about, it is 11,000 additional sales per second. That's how much Amazon is selling more than they were before. And their initial thing was hiring 100,000 people. Now I heard they were going to hire 75,000 more. And so there are areas of the economy that are really pushing this technology. And what is it about that? Like, many people I know had taken the first step of doing their orders for groceries ahead of time and then driving and picking it up, saving the time of going through every aisle to pick it up. Did I order the right things? Did I remember stuff? There's a time cost as well as a cost of going into the grocery store. So they were used to, many people I know have gotten used to doing that. However, now that it's online, think of how quickly we've gone from, even a year ago, how rare was it to put your order in online ahead of time? And now, it's no longer even rare to get your order delivered to you. So you have Kroger and Publix and Walmart and Amazon delivering groceries now, and in food delivery in our area, food delivery is pretty terrible. Some places, New York, California, things like that, you can get a lot of things delivered. Here, where I live, especially, I can't even get Chipotle delivered here, which is a travesty.
It's
And
tragic.
it is. But if I go to like DoorDash or Uber Eats or something, these companies are doing it. And there was a lot of like growing pains. Like you'd see those horror videos of people like the driver is getting into your French fries and you're like, no, I don't want that. Yesterday we had pizza delivered here with a sealed sticker on the top of the box. And so there's finding ways to be creative to adopt these new technologies where you have everyone is getting more comfortable with adopting the technology. So I agree with you. I can see that happening. And other churches I know are using Marco Polo. Our church is using Zoom for youth group. So there's all these different kinds of communication options that I feel like I'm pretty up on technology, but I had not heard of Zoom because I use a different one for work, and I had not heard of Marco Polo, and now everybody knows them, And so, I agree with you on that, 100%.
Well, you brought up another one of the things that I was going to mention on things that are going to change.
Amy told me your list ahead of time. I'm just agreeing with you. She did.
It's and I think that's has to do with our grocery shopping. I've just kind of been noticing the few times that I've gone in to the stores. This is kind of interesting. Everything's supposed to be shut down except the essential things, and I know that like there's far more essential things than we thought, and we think that, oh, really? Why is a marijuana dispensary an essential business, but you can't go and buy seeds for your garden? Why is that? I don't understand that. And that's not in the state of Tennessee. That's in other places because we don't have legalized marijuana just yet. And I hope that we don't. I don't think that's a wise thing. So that's a little sidebar. But I have noticed that when I have gone out two different places, Sam's Club and Kroger, I'll pull into the parking lot and there is a good amount of cars in the parking lot, like kind of the regular amount of cars in the parking lot during that time of day that you would normally have seen before the quarantine started. So it was kind of a little bit curious of like, wait a second. I thought everybody's supposed to be home. Well, a couple of different things. The grocery store, Sam's Club, they're some of the only things that are open. And I think some people are just like there because they can be. But I also go into the stores and I look around, I'm going, wait a second. I don't see the amount of people inside of the store that are reflected by the amount of cars that are in the parking lot. What's that all about? And I was mentioning this to a friend of mine, and he gave me a little bit of insider information that he had. And he said that these stores have the employees that would normally be working, the second and third shift. They're bringing them in. And there is still part of a second shift, but most of the stores that I know of are closing around 7 o'clock now. I mean, if you don't have it by 7 p.m., good luck. You're not going to get it until 8 o'clock tomorrow morning or later. I think I went into Kroger yesterday and I saw that they are opening maybe at 10 a.m. Something, if I recall correctly, at least the Kroger that's close to my house is opening at 10 a.m. and closing at 7 p.m. So they're having workers there during the day that normally wouldn't be. But they're not all out on the floor. Some of them are in the back and they're working and they're doing things. So that's interesting. But I also see what got me started off on all this is that I see that the way that we buy our everyday goods, such as groceries and other dry products, I think that's going to change a lot. I see that the grocery industry is probably going to use this as a leverage point to move the culture and to move the way that we do things intentionally. Whereas they were probably waiting on the consumers to catch up with what they wanted to do. Now they are in the position to really force us to do what they want us to do.
Well, yeah, because self-service options and things like that are significantly less expensive for whatever industry you're working on. And I mean, that's why Amazon has so many robots. And they were talking about having drone delivery, things like that, because you can put something in. I'm doing all the work. I'm putting it in the computer. I'm shopping. I'm the one buying it. I'm the one paying for it. And then if that can be done automatically, you don't need a cashier. You don't need,
Oh yeah.
Amazon, for instance, in their warehouse, their warehouse is a ton of robots. They have a lot of people too. So I'm not saying they don't, but I believe that the goal to go for 100% automation, and self-service is a step to get there. So I can agree with you on that. I also think that as we get used to this over the months of limited hours of things, we might not see an immediate expansion back to 11 o'clock at night closing times for some things, because if customer service, for instance, at wherever you bank and wherever you have your mobile phone or wherever you have your bills, if they're all closing at 6 or 7, and Home Depot's closing at 6, and the Kroger's closing at 7, and you're going to get used to that after a while. You might see it expand a little bit, but I wonder how much businesses are going to be excited about re-expanding, because every hour is incredibly expensive to run. And there are some hours that, I can imagine those hours are not lucrative hours, and they're just open for the few customers so that they have that available. But there's a certain point. They
one business that does need to go back to 24/7 service is Waffle House.
I can see those kinds of places going later. But there's even now there's some restaurants where they're not open for breakfast. They're only open for lunch, or they start open in the afternoon. They're only open for dinner. And that's because you might get some customers during that time, but it doesn't justify the expense of having it open and paying all the employees. And I can see a lot of businesses are going to have that. They're going to realize, I could do this without being open those hours. So why should I be open those hours? Maybe I should only be open a limited amount of hours, which goes back to your, do we really need this many employees thing, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So
is there another thing on your list?
There's one more that I'm hoping for. Cause I've been talking to a couple people and I think it's becoming more and more clear that excuse me for that, I dropped my phone. Public school is a lot about daycare, a lot more about daycare than maybe even about education. And I'm not saying public schools aren't trying to educate. I'm not trying to disparage anything. But the fact of the matter is, we don't need to send our kids to school for 8 hours a day.
No.
They don't need to get up at 6 in the morning or 5 in the morning so that they can get on the bus, so they can get to the school, so that they can spend a lot of the day. And, and I'm not an expert, but I was a substitute teacher. I was a summer school teacher, and I was for a short period of time a private school junior high teacher. I saw what happens in a lot of classes. There's a lot of filler time, unfortunately, and so it's not like you're actually learning that whole period of time.
No.
And so, in one teacher I overheard talking about elementary schools closing for the rest of the year here in Tennessee. And they're like, well, the good news is we've already finished all of the class stuff that we were required to teach for the whole year. And now we've just spending the last couple of months doing like test prep for state testing. And and I can understand why state testing is important, but if you could finish everything in 2/3 of the year, why are you open for 3/3 of the year, so to speak, right? It's just an efficiency thing. And I feel like a lot of it is to do with just watching the kids. But
and money from the government.
Yeah.
Government funding.
Right. Funding. But that's funding to justify keeping the store open for longer, kind of. It's almost the same conversation, right?
Yeah.
And I do not mean to be offensive to any teachers, but I am aware that, like in every job, there are generally more positions open than there are highly skilled expert people you want in those positions. And so there are some people, like you've seen the documentaries, where there are some teachers that just have no business being teachers anymore. And if we could do it more efficiently, I'd like to see virtual reality classrooms. and things like that, where you can go to class in virtual reality, or you can do it online at your own pace. Self-directed learning is the kind of learning that kids actually keep, and adults too. If I want to go there and do the learning, I'm going to learn what I need to learn. If you force me to sit through a class and I know it's over in 45 minutes anyways before I go to the next one, I don't have to learn. I'm a captive, So there's some stuff that I'd like to see there. I'd like to see some more efficiencies in terms of teaching. If it doesn't take that long, don't make our kids get up so early. If it doesn't take that long, don't make our kids go to school that long. If it's just daycare, then find some alternatives to that. There are other alternatives. There's like the old school stuff, like Boys and Girls Club, YMCA, things like that, where we can do daycare where the kids can run around. Because putting boys in a classroom setting, especially elementary school, putting little boys in those classrooms and saying, sit still for the next 6 hours is not beneficial to them or to the classroom. They're just not made to do that. And I know some girls are not either, so I'm talking about in general terms, but it's just not a natural way of learning for them. It's not a natural way of learning, I think, for any of the kids. And you see a lot of that where, it's just not good for them. And then they get to a point where they go to recess, where they have PE a couple times a week. It's not even like you get PE every day. So there's no time to burn off that energy, to spend time with the friends and things like that. So I would like to see schools change. And I would like to see it. I'd like to see the time right-sized. I'd like to see better use of technology. And where possible and where appropriate, I'd like to see things like virtual reality, where we don't have to have the kids going to school all day long.
I would be very interested if there are any educators that are listening to this right now, that if they had opinions about things that should or shouldn't change, I would love to hear from them. So, hey, if you're listening right now and you've got, opinions, and maybe you're an educator, maybe you're a former educator, maybe you just are opinionated.
We like those people.
We're opinionated.
Yeah.
Every human being is, whether they say so or not. Everyone has opinions. Leave us a comment. I would be interested to hear what your ideas are of, maybe how the system should change moving forward. I think it's very interesting. And I have kind of, in some ways, it's, in some ways I'm, tired of the kids being around the house so much.
Sometimes, for sure.
But I will say this, in other ways, I've loved having the kids around the house so much.
Yeah.
I think that my relationship with my kids, from my wife and I think it's growing. I think that it's not just, I think our friendship with them is growing, and especially our two older ones. We've got two teenagers, one's 17, one's 15. And so, yes, we're still mom and dad, but they're in that transitional phase of life where they are becoming an adult. And so we're giving them, we're treating them more like an adult. And so everything's not so rigid and so like, this way or the highway. They're finding more liberties, finding more freedoms, and we're allowing them to make mistakes on some levels. And some levels that we're not like, no, you have to do it this way. And if you don't, there's a consequence for that, not just at home, but there's a consequence in real life. And that's why you need to do it my way. But so some ways I'm tired of them being at home so much, simply probably because, I'm a little bit more of an introvert. I like having time by myself. That's oftentimes why I stay up a little bit later at night after everyone has gone to bed, and which I can't do that anymore because everybody is staying up later in the house.
It's never goes.
So if I do that, it's like I'm staying up till like 3:00 in the morning. Not literally, but I'm losing sleep if I stay up later than everyone else goes to bed. So we're all going to bed later. We're all getting up later, but we're all getting our work done as well. And we're enjoying one another. We're playing board games together. We're having a great time. Like I said, sometimes I wish they would just get out of the house so that my wife and I could just make out on the couch. Okay. So
you're not going to hear me argue.
Yeah. Right.
I agree. If there was a way for them to still play with their friends in the neighborhood every day, so they wake up, whenever they've had enough sleep, they do some chores, they do some schoolwork, and then they play with their friends, and then they hang out with us, and we watch a show together or something. I actually think this is great. I've actually had it in my mind, like, if this is what homeschooling could be like, could they do their school in a short period of time and still get to hang out with their friends when they get home from school or whatever? This would actually not be so bad, because I do like the fact that they can sleep in. A lot of times the worst part of the day is trying to get everybody up in time for school. Total pain. And then they're tired the whole day, so they get home from school and they're annoyed, and then we have to be on them about their homework, and we don't always know 100% what they're learning or whether they're learning or what they're supposed to do, and there's a disconnection there. So I agree with you.
And I think this also kind of joins this conversation. Homework. You mentioned homework. I mean, everything's homework right now, thank God.
Mm-hmm.
But, one of the things I despise is my children being at school for as long as they are, from 8 o'clock in the morning to 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and then coming home with 2 hours or more of homework. I think it's absolutely absurd. And I think it's crazy. And I don't care what teacher or what administrator from my kid's school is hearing this right now. Okay. I'm a little passionate about this, but I think it's crazy that they don't coordinate together a little bit better on testing. And I just think it's crazy that my child is being sent home with an hour of schoolwork in this class, an hour of schoolwork in this class, an hour of homework in this class, all in the same day. And so I'm liking this system of them getting it done at home a little bit better. And and it's been a little rough and rocky, not just for my kids, but I've had conversations with other parents as well, who this is a new system that we're navigating, and we need to give grace to our educators right now, and the educators need to give grace to our kids and to our parents right now as we're figuring all of this out.
Yeah, but if you asked, would you be okay as an adult worker to wake up early in the morning and then work for 12 hours? Is that what you want? I'm not saying that some of us don't have to do that, and there are days where you have to, but if that was your every single day, would you like that job? And yet we're asking our kids to do that sometimes, and they're not as equipped as us, to be able to handle it. And so you get them up at early in the morning, they go to school all day, and then they got a lot of homework afterwards, and that's their equivalent of work, and it's not great. So I agree. I would like to see it. They can do it. Since Maggie homeschooled this year, since Christmas, she does everything online on her own time. She only puts in a couple hours of work, and that's it. That's the whole day. And if she's not careful, she's going to finish her senior year in like a couple months. And I'm like, that's all you have to know? That's all of the classes? And yeah, when you boil it right down, that's all they got to know. So there's a lot of stuff happening in school. And I just wonder why they can't have that homework done at school as well or something. It just seems like too much time is being asked of these kids. And I don't know about your kids, but my kids get real grumpy when they come home from school. They've been waiting for freedom all day, and now you're going to go sit at the table and do homework for an hour. They're not excited about that.
One of the things I'd like to see schools do a better job of, and I'm not picking on my kids' schools right now, because I think they're doing a decent job at this. Not to say that they couldn't do better, but I would like to see schools in general in the United States start teaching our kids how to critically think. And I know that you and I have been in some situations where we've talked about this already, but
yeah,
I think that we are trying to do the job of let's teach our kids to pass a test, a written test. And I think that's not really how the world works. That's not how you get ahead in the world, I should say. The way that you get ahead in the world, the most successful people are ones who are able to problem solve and critically think and think outside the box. And I think that we have, and I'm not just picking on education. I'm not just picking on the education sector and schools. And parents have a huge responsibility when it comes to this as well. As a matter of fact, parents have the number one responsibility when it comes to this, because they're your kids. And so we have to, as parents, teach our kids to not just think of in this linear way of do this and then this and then this and then this, because sometimes that's not the quickest way from point A to point B, or the best way, or the most profitable way. And so I think it's incredibly important for us to teach our kids critical thinking skills. And I think, again, my kids' schools, I think they're doing an okay job at that. Again, there could be some improvement, but I think a lot of schools are not doing a great job of that. And that's probably because of the daycare element that we've talked about. We're just, there's a lot of filler stuff. And I'm going, man, if we would be less concerned about some of these things that we're teaching our kids. I'm not saying that algebra is not important. I'm not saying that geometry is not important. I'm not saying that calculus doesn't have its place. But I will say this, that not for every student, all of those things aren't necessary. But what is necessary for every student is critical thinking skills.
Yeah. Well, there was a book I read years ago, and this one line, I can't even remember the name of the book, but this one line stuck with me. And it was basically something like, education shouldn't be necessarily about spitting out the right answers.
Right.
Education should be more about having the right questions. And for me, what that is like, if you can learn to ask the right questions in a situation, you can find the answers. We have every answer to man on the internet. The question is, do you know how to get to it? And so some of the stuff we are still stuck in is memorize this, which, there are some things we should memorize, but if we don't understand how to index that information or what to do with that information, we're just filling our brains up with stuff that we don't know. It's like throwing a bunch of files together in a pile. We need a system where you can say, now, what do we do with this? There's that second part. And I think teachers are trying to do that. And I think that many teachers are successful in doing that, but I don't think necessarily when we're teaching to a test that the goal is ultimately to say, are we teaching our kids how to think? Instead, are we making sure our kids are getting a certain score on the test and so on? And that's really just about regurgitating, right? Regurgitating information. So yeah, I agree with you. I would like to see more creative thinking. I know we talked about that. We can talk about it more another day too, but I'd like to see people understand basic statistics. I'd like people, variations and how to read that kind of information. I'd like people to understand logical fallacies a little bit better, because we do the same thing, everything around us. And it's not just TikTok people not knowing how to spell 2 and 2, there, and there, and so on. It's like, there's X amount of this happening. Well, that's the same as this. And you're like, wait, that doesn't even make any sense, And you see these weird correlations being put out all the time, and it affects our news, everything.
One of the last things I want to talk about that I think is going to change. You gave your 3, and I kind of gave some. I don't know if I gave 3 or not, here or there. But one of the things I think is going to change is entertainment, and specifically the movie industry. And so what we've seen through all of this quarantine are movies that were released in theaters. They were in the theaters for a week or two, and then boom, they're now immediately available to rent, to stream, whatever platform that you're on, whether it's Vudu or iTunes, Amazon Prime, whatever. I'm sure there's others as well, but I think we're going to see more of that. I think that going to I hope that movie theaters still exist. I do think some of them are going to close. I don't think we're going to see as many of those as that exist now. And again, that's a sad thing, because that means loss of jobs in some way. But I do think that we're going to see a lot more movies streaming at home sooner. And I think we've already seen that trend before now, because we've seen Netflix movies that have released directly to Netflix, movies that have released directly to Amazon Prime. We've seen really good movies and quality television shows. When I say quality, I don't mean like the content as, like family friendly. I mean like the quality of the production. The production quality is really high. on all these platforms now. They've have their own shows that they've produced. Jamie and I watched a show on our Apple TV called The Servant. And it's not a show for everybody. I'm not recommending everyone go out and watch that. But what I'm saying is that the quality of that show is very high quality. And it's not a network show. It's not on CBS or NBC or ABC or Fox. It's as high quality of a show that you might see on HBO, which, HBO has been producing really high quality shows for years and years and years. But now we've got all these other companies that are catching up: Netflix, Amazon Prime, and now Apple. And so I think that we're going to see less activity in movie theaters, and we're going to see more of that stuff at home. Now, I love going to the movies. I absolutely love it, but it's becoming more and more expensive. It's becoming more and more elaborate. I like the new amenities. I don't really care for the full service dine-in stuff, or at least the one experience that I had at an AMC. I don't have anything against AMC, but the one AMC experience where I went and I paid for my entire family to have a meal inside the theater, that was a travesty. I mean, it was an absolute train wreck, and it was incredibly expensive. And I said to myself, not doing that ever again. We will just go to the movie and get our regular soda and popcorn and candy. But we're not doing like the $30 per person to get our meal delivered to us and have it dumped in the floor by the server in the complete dark. I mean, it was a mess, literally and figuratively, both.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I've been going digital for a while now. Most of my movies and entertainment is digital, and I haven't had cable for, I don't know, probably close to a decade. And so I can see that. And you have these companies like Disney Plus and Hulu and Netflix and Amazon that are outspending their competitors, in the bidding wars for where something's going to show up. And you did have it a little bit, but especially mediocre movies. I'm not really sure. I'm not familiar with the revenue. That's one of the things I'm curious about, because you had some of these movies that came out that, let's say it would have made $100 million at the theater. How much did it make going digital? Like the Trolls World Tour. That would have clearly made 150, 200 million in the US, and it would have made a lot more than that everywhere else, right? So how much did it make by going digital for $20 a rental? And was it the same without the overhead and stuff? Because I know, if I understand correctly, the theater gets a pretty good sized cut of every ticket. And so when you hear they've sold $100 million in tickets, my understanding is that doesn't mean anything when it comes to how much they've actually earned. Or maybe I'm misunderstanding it and that is their cut. I don't know. But I hit the springs again. Look at that. That's what I get for moving my hands around. So I'm interested to see, but I can agree with you that we already saw theaters kind of go into a premium format with the reclining chairs and less seating. And I think probably you can see more of that, and it'll become more of a high-end entertainment thing rather than a go there all the time kind of thing where you get packed into a little theater. More of like a first class flight versus coach flight kind of thing. So I can see that, and I just don't see them needing to have 20 theaters. Some movies, I think you're going to still want to see them on a big screen.
Oh, certainly, I do. Yeah.
Yeah, and you almost kind of got to, because frankly, some of the digital effects don't look that good on high definition televisions, but they look great on a big projector, in a theater. And so the surround sound, even if you got a really great surround sound at your house, it's not going to be the same. But but that's interesting. I'm interested to see the financial aspects as that starts to come out, because if they make more money that way, without as much of the middleman, so to speak, I can see a lot of films that that we used to deride as going straight to disc or something. I could see them going straight to digital.
Okay, so speaking of movies, we watched a movie recently, and I know that you watched it as well, called Dark Water or Dark Waters or something like that.
Yeah,
it was the story of this attorney who worked with chemical companies,
Yeah.
and he got turned on to a case against DuPont. It's a true story. Mark Ruffalo is the one who stars in it. He does not play the Hulk, but he plays an attorney. And it's a true story. It's quite a remarkable story. And at the end of that movie, I was like, I want to find everything in my house that has any kind of Teflon coating, and I want to throw it out and get rid of it.
Yeah.
But you can't really burn anything with Teflon because it's actually indestructible.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
Yeah. Anyway, that's a great movie. If you like serious movies, which I do from time to time. I
This
thought
decade's Aaron Brockovich.
But another movie I know that both of us have seen, you saw it before I did, but I recently saw it this week with my family, is The Peanut Butter Falcon with Shia LaBeouf. And it's a very different movie. It's very interesting. I enjoyed it very much. I don't think it's a movie for everybody. I don't think it's a movie that everybody will enjoy. It's PG-13, and it definitely is PG-13. There's a little bit of language in it, and the whole premise of the movie is not something that like little kids would enjoy or get into. We're gonna do spoiler alert on this one,
Yes,
okay? Spoilers. So if you've not seen the movie The Peanut Butter Falcon with Shia LaBeouf and you want to, we're going to talk about it right now, and we're going to give you the opportunity to leave the podcast. And if you are, we hope that you join us next time. Thanks for listening this far.
They already took the opportunity to leave the podcast. No one's still listening at this point. So
yeah. They're like, I left when you started yelling at educators. In this movie, there's like these two storylines, these two characters that converge, and one of them is a kid who's looks to be like he's in his early to mid 20s. He's a Down syndrome kid. He's a ward of the state. He's living in a state funded nursing home of some kind, and it's just really not a good situation. He's surrounded by elderly people only. He doesn't have anybody that he really personally, kind of connects with. He's young. He's adventurous. He wants to get out. He wants to go find this wrestling school that exists, in the state. I think takes place. It starts in Virginia, and then it kind of just moves down the coast a little bit into North Carolina. And the aim is for Shia LaBeouf. He is in trouble with the local fishermen, which he was part of that community. And, this is a rough dude. This is a rough guy. And he ends up getting into it with a guy who has all these crab traps, and he's stealing crabs from him in his traps. Then he sets his crab traps on fire, and then he's on the lam. He's on the run. And he's trying to get down to Florida. And he runs into this kid who escaped from the nursing home. And this kid is trying to make it down to North Carolina to this wrestling school. And it's just a remarkable kind of story, remarkable to me. It's just very interesting. I don't know who came up with the idea or the concept. But it's very, very different, and I like it. I think that everybody did a pretty good job in the film. It seemed like they employed different kind of actors in the movie, very similar to like Napoleon Dynamite. Like you had some actors in the movie and you're like, those just look like normal, regular people, not like Hollywood actors. But it kind of fits the vibe of the movie, right? And so if it seems good, it seems right. You and I were kind of just barely chatting about it, and you said to me that you hated the ending.
Yeah, I did. So this is
which just surprised me a little bit because I didn't hate it.
I really enjoyed the almost redemptive quality of the relationship between Shia LaBeouf and the young man who has Down syndrome. And he really has Down syndrome,
right,
which is
yes.
excellent that he's in this film. I'm very proud of him. In their relationship, because Shia loses a brother. And that's kind of how, if I remember correctly, that's how it sets everything in part. He loses his brother, and then they lose their license, and then the other people step in and take the license for the fishing. And then Shia's like, no, that's still my brother's land or my brother's area or something like that. Okay.
Yeah, territory.
So he's lost his family, and then he kind of finds his family with this young man. And those scenes are outstanding when they're at on the beach, and they're, and the kid is learning and he's kind of learning, and they're kind of getting along, and there's a lot of development there. But there is a part where I think it totally jumps the shark, and that's the wrestling match. So they get to the wrestling match. The school is closed. This is where the spoilers are. It's VHS tapes from like 20 years ago, and the guy's a has-been. And anyway, but they get to an actual outdoor rink where a bunch of rednecks are playing WWE, and
but they're not just playing like,
they're hurting each other.
They're hurting each other.
Yeah, they're playing it for real. And the Down syndrome kid goes in there, and someone starts beating him up. It's pretty terrible, right? But then there gets a point where he like picks him up, spins him around over his head, and chucks him out of the ring. And I'm just like, oh, and it looks so fake, and it looks like it's a dream sequence. And I'm just like, what is this nonsense?
But it was supposed to be that way.
Yeah, I'm not saying that the director and the producers didn't do what they wanted to do. I'm saying they didn't do what I wanted them to do.
Okay.
So
what would you have done different there?
I don't know. I don't know, but I didn't like that. Like there could have, maybe he gets beat up and that's the rest of that story, and then they have to kind of go on from there. Or maybe Shia LaBeouf's character steps in and saves him, and that's how he gets hurt. Or I don't know. I don't have to rewrite it to say I didn't like what someone else wrote. But but I didn't like that part. I felt like it goes fantasy on that. And then right after that, it ends with Shia LaBeouf getting hit over the head, going to the hospital. They break him out of the hospital. So he's either, number one, I think he's dying, and they're driving him down there. Some people think he was, healthy, and they're driving him down there. And so either way, that part didn't bother me so much. It was really that wrestling match. And then,
okay.
And then you get after that, and you're kind of like, why don't you tell us which way it goes? That's, good. You have us talking about.
Yeah. You fill in the blank yourself
6 months ago. So I'm still thinking about it, obviously. So that
I didn't know had been that long since you'd seen it, but
we saw it in the theaters.
Okay.
With some of our
before
friends.
the quarantine.
Before the quarantine, that's right. Back in the day when we could go outside.
Yeah.
We did.
Remember when, kids?
We lived the danger of going to a building with other people.
Okay, well, that's interesting. I didn't know that you were going to say that part of. I mean, obviously, all of that is kind of part of the same sequence, as part of the same scene, where the kid, throws the other guy out of the ring, and then Shia LaBeouf gets hit over the head with a tire iron. But I didn't know you were going to say that part. I thought maybe you didn't like that Shia LaBeouf got hit over the head, and then ends up in the hospital, and then how the rest of that plays out. So it's interesting to me. Now, I will say this. I will say I totally see your point. And I think that if they were going to have written that into the movie where the kid grabs the enormous guy and lifts him over his head.
He's massive.
He's twice his size. But throughout the entire movie, there is this undercurrent of how strong this kid is, how powerful and how strong he is. And so that it's not like a surprise that he was actually ended up doing it. There's hints along the way. There's breadcrumbs.
A surprise that he's doing that. Plus,
right. So
he was strong.
Yeah,
sure.
He lifts the guy over his head, and then he does, but it doesn't look like it was incredibly difficult.
Right.
And it doesn't, and then he throws them, and it is very fantasy-like because the guy just kind of obviously is on a harness, and that's okay to me, but I will agree with you. If I had directed that part of the movie, I would have made it look like it was more realistic. Like there was some struggle to lift him, and that when he threw him, it would have been a realistic distance. Maybe not even out of the ring. Right.
Or he could have just hit him.
Right.
Or something, because he is strong, right? So he gives him an elbow to the head and it knocks him out, and that's the end.
Technically his elbow couldn't reach his head because the guy really is enormous.
He was huge.
But
Andre the Giant.
So I thought you were going to say again that you didn't like the part where Shia LaBeouf got hit. So I would have done this differently, possibly. I would have made Shia LaBeouf die in the hospital. So when they're driving at the end of the movie, where the girl and the Down syndrome guy are driving to Florida, and all of a sudden like you realize that Shia LaBeouf is in the back seat of the car with his head bandaged up. It was almost like,
Right.
oh, he made it after he did make it after all. It was kind of a weird feeling because you do kind of are left with a feeling that before that he passed away, that he died in the hospital.
Right, because
And
it looks like it. It looks like they come out and talk, and then you can see the people, and they're sad, and yeah.
But I still enjoyed it, and the movie does end right there, like that. You know that they're going to Florida. You know that Shia LaBeouf has dreams of owning his own fishing boat down there and starting a
Right.
business and yada yada yada. And you don't, and so you're left with like your own fill in the blank. Like, did that happen? What happened? Did they just go down and visit? You know what's going on. But there is a lot of really great things about that film, and I think you mentioned those already. So anyway, the Peanut Butter Falcon. Again, if you watched it and liked it, remember that you heard about it here on Everyone Else Has a Podcast. If you watched it and you hated it, which I think that's probably kind of where you're going to lie. I think you're either going to like it or you're not going to like it. I don't think it's, I don't know. What was your final take on it?
I thought it was really interesting up until they broke me out of the suspension belief.
Okay, so you made it a really long way. I mean, you made it until like the last 10 minutes of the movie until that you.
Yeah, I really did.
Yeah.
But that's kind of like that's how the whole world works. Like you can be in a great movie that you're super enjoying, and then the last minute really ruin it, and that can change the way you view the whole film, and vice versa. And in this case, it's a journey, it's a self-discovery, it's a redemption story. So it's not one that you just sit down and let's watch this a bunch of times. But I enjoyed all the way to the point where it just got fantastical. And then from that point, everything was just like, why did you do that? Now, the other people I was with our friends, the Masons, David and Victoria and Alice, and they all three liked it. So I'm clearly in the minority when it comes to that fantastical scene in the,
well, you're not. It's no surprise that you're in the minority, Scott.
I know. Yeah, that's right.
Well, hey, thanks for listening to Everyone Else Has a Podcast with Scott and J.D. And maybe someday you'll have a podcast too. See you next time.
Why not?